Think EV and you think Tesla. This Model Y hatch is the brand's offering for the mid-sized crossover segment, a car that aims to redefine what a premium electric vehicle of this sort can deliver. It shares its powertrain and much of its design with its Model 3 saloon showroom stablemate, which means it comes with all the values you'd associate with this innovative American brand: long battery range, easy charging and an avant-garde cabin. It's also very fast in this dual-motor all-wheel drive form. European rivals shade this Tesla for quality and have more accessible interior design, but in this segment there's still nothing quite like this car.
Tesla, once a start-up company sneered at by the established makers, before they realised the brand was serious and struggled to follow its lead in automotive EV technology. And just as they caught up, along came this contender, the Model Y, the company's first really high-volume global EV. It's a car that rivals always feared Tesla would build. They've had plenty of time to prepare for it, even though 75% of this mid-sized crossover hatch design is shared with the Tesla Model 3 Saloon, launched in 2017. It took the marque until 2020 to get the car to market in the US, and a further 2 years more to get it into customers' hands in Europe. A delay so protracted that by the time we came to film this car in the early summer of 2022, we already knew that a substantially updated version with better battery range was just months away, as was the start of full production for European markets from Tesla's new Gigafactory in Berlin, one of 4 global plants that'll build this car, producing up to 500,000 Model Ys a year. Here, really, for the first time, this visionary American maker has a real fight on its hands. In earlier cars, the Roadster of 2009, the Model S of 2012 and the Model X of 2015 faced only patchy opposition. Even that Model 3 design we mentioned didn't face the kind of overcrowded market this Model Y must win over. So, what chance does it stand? Does Tesla still have an EV advantage when it comes to the crucial issues of range and charging? And even if it does, would you want a Y in preference to impressive rival EVs from more established makers? Especially given the premium prices Tesla now wants to charge. All good questions. You'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the car and driving road test, to answer them. You'd think that after a decade of Teslas, the otherworldly experience of getting into one might seem more commonplace. But it doesn't feel that way to us, and we don't think it will for you either. As in the brand's other designs, most of the driving control features you might be familiar with are absent, which means there's no instrument binnacle or, weirdly, any physical switchgear to control the lights or continually operate the wipers. All of this dealt with by menu functions on the enormous central screen. A handbrake's missing too, as is a starter button. You actually activate the powertrain by tapping this key card on the centre panel behind the cup holders, then simply select Drive from the right-hand steering wheel stalk, at which point you're ready. But for what? It's the fashion amongst EVs these days for a little combustion-like linearity in the way they accelerate. But Tesla doesn't follow fashion. This car simply hurls itself away from rest, even in this conventional long-range form. That's because your right foot is commanding 434 braked horses. And if that's somehow not enough, the alternative performance model raises that figure to 483 bhp. Either way, electric motors propel you from both front and rear axles, creating the car's dual-motor all-wheel drive system, producing 575 newton-meters of torque and dispatching the 62-mile-an-hour sprint in just 4.8 seconds, or 3.5 seconds in the performance version. Tesla's also disdained the current fashion for limiting top speed on EVs. This one will cruise on the Autobahn at up to 135 miles an hour or 155 miles an hour in the performance version. The Model Y doesn't have a sport drive mode, and it clearly doesn't need one. The ordinary standard setting, quite enough to bring up your breakfast and attract the constabulary's attention if you engage too frequently in repeated right foot flexes. Better, if you can, to chill, quite literally, because that's the name of the second, more laid-back setting that'll better preserve that all-important drive range figure. It's officially quoted at 331 miles for this long-range version, or 319 miles for the Model Y performance variant, figures that outstrip much lower-powered segment competitors and easily surpass the range capacities of rivals with similarly gutsy drivetrains. You can subtract a bit from that for the needs of real-world driving, of course. Also bear in mind, though, that these figures are for the pre-update 2170 series battery powertrain we're trying here, shortly to be replaced by a more advanced 4680 series battery pack version, not available to us at the time of this test, but said to facilitate a 16% improvement in range. If ultimate driving range isn't essential for you, then you may also want to consider the entry-level rear-driven Model Y variant, which offers up to 283 miles of range. That's all good, but big range figures inevitably need a big, dense, heavy battery. This one's estimated to be 75 kilowatt hours in size, a figure Tesla won't confirm. But in any case, the kind of bulky power pack you might think would be about as conducive to dynamic engagement as hanging a huge anchor out the back. On top of that, Tesla's being run by visionaries who seem to prefer a future in which their owners aren't imposed upon to actually drive their cars at all, as the company continues its relentless pursuit of autonomous driving technology. Yet Elon Musk and his team clearly like a challenge, especially one so clearly shirked by the established brands who can no longer ignore the threat this Californian automaker poses. So, in creating this car, heads were hunted, test tracks were pounded, and budgets broken in order to create the kind of Model Y that would make competitors and their buyers sit up and take notice. Is that what we've got? Well, yes and no. It doesn't take many miles behind the wheel of this car to realise that there are clearly things in vehicle development that Tesla prioritises. Stuff like drive range and acceleration. And equally obviously, there seems to be areas the brand feels deserve less attention. We would number ride quality and refinement amongst these. High-speed undulations don't seem to trouble the Model Y very much, but it struggles much more than a car of this price should at lower speeds over poor surfaces. And unfortunately, it can't be embellished with the kind of adaptive damping system that Tesla doesn't want to offer at this price point. The refinement issue will probably be less of a deal breaker because at a cruise, this car is no noisier than a comparable combustion model. But think about that for a moment. It darn well ought to be far quieter than a comparable combustion model, given the lack of a great big combustion lump up front. As it is, though commuting speeds are quiet, apart from the mandatory battery noise simulator, on the highway, tyre roar and wind noise destroy the EV-style calm you'd hope for. These things could probably be sorted pretty quickly by a competent team of European brand engineers, but probably won't be by Tesla for this generation design because the company's attention is clearly diverted elsewhere into the creation of auto-drive camera systems, V3 supercharging sites and global locations for new gigafactories, which is a pity because there's a potentially class-leading set of all-round drive dynamics buried away in this car just waiting to be fully realised. Even as it is, if your experience of Teslas relates to the older, larger, pre-Model 3 era designs, you'll find it quite a new experience being at the wheel of a car from the company that can really handle. Those older Teslas went very fast when you stamped down your right foot and managed not to lurch about too much through the bends because of the low-down, centrally mounted placement of their battery packs. But as for cornering finesse, well, forget it. Here it's different. The firm damping that exacerbates that ride issue is, of course, very welcome at speed through tight turns. Corners you can enter quickly and place the car into with unerring accuracy thanks to a sharp steering rack offering comfort, standard and sport modes. None of these settings quite manage to make you feel really connected into what the front wheels are doing beneath you, but the rack itself allows for a degree of steering precision we can't recall enjoying to the same extent in any other EV. And thanks to a relative lack of body roll for such a high-sided car and the prodigious grip on offer from the dual-motor all-wheel drive system, an enthusiastic driver on their favourite secondary road will feel encouraged to exploit it all, making point-to-point cross-country trips feel as if they're being completed at warp speed. Would a keen driver miss the sound of a classic engine throbbing away up front? Well, of course they would. But the simple truth is that the vast majority of cars traditionally sold in this segment have never used such a thing. Too often, prior to the EV revolution, what customers in this class actually ended up with was a rumbly diesel mated to an anodyne automatic. Would you miss that if traded for this Model Y's electrified adrenaline rush? Quite possibly not. In this car, there's actually a whole new driving dynamic in play, if you can be bothered to adjust yourself to it. The sensitivity of your right foot, for instance, becomes of vital importance, replacing clutch pedal or paddle shift technique and coordination. For sure, it's strange not to have an engine note hourly guiding you through your various driving tasks, but after a while in a Model Y, you might begin to find the absence of that soundtrack equally enriching, helping to focus your mind on things like steering feel, cornering angles, and the way the car is responding beneath you. Other EVs add in the extra element of customizable settings for brake regeneration, accessed either via steering wheel paddles or some kind of one-pedal driving screen button. Surprisingly, Tesla doesn't want to bother you with that here. The powertrain's set up for abrupt retardation off throttle all the time. So abrupt that the brake lights flash when it's happening. You can increase that at lower speeds by selecting a hold stopping mode option from the pedals and steering section of the main screen. And if you do so, then you'll find that unless you're coming to a stop or braking in an emergency, you'll rarely use the left-hand pedal. Overall, it's a simpler approach to the whole issue of brake energy regeneration, battery replenishment, that we think most customers will probably prefer. More positives are accrued by the impressively well-modulated throttle, though it's still prone to lurch the car forward like a startled rabbit if used without due care. To return to the acceleration stat we quoted earlier, if you were to mash it into the bulkhead of the top performance spec variant, you'll reach 60 miles an hour as quickly as a Ferrari Portofino. That's the situation as of today anyway. Tomorrow, both Model Y variants might be even quicker, courtesy of the over-the-air drivetrain software updates that without fanfare, Tesla simply adds to its customers' cars as it goes along. There's something rather wonderful about the thought that the Model Y you left powering up in the garage last night might not be the same one you'll drive tomorrow. With this kind of speed and performance potential, you'd want a car with four-wheel drive in a climate like ours. And true to form, as we suggested earlier, Tesla's dual-motor powertrain provides all-wheel drive with impressive assurance. The dual-motor system's two drive units are programmed to constantly shift power from front to rear to keep each motor in its power and efficiency sweet spot, with one motor geared for quick acceleration and the other tuned for efficient high-speed cruising. This is theoretically an SUV crossover, so we also ought to add in a word or two about its capability on slippery or unmade surfaces. Surprisingly, there is some, thanks to a selectable off-road assist system, which adjusts the traction control to optimise performance off-road. Plus, Tesla's also added a slip start feature, which may help to free your Model Y should it be stuck in snow, sand or mud. Obviously, you shouldn't take this as an invitation to explore gnarly, unmade trails. There isn't the ground clearance for that. But in the depths of winter, in a muddy car park or on a snowy driveway in February, these features will be welcome. Since this is a Tesla, we should talk not only about how you can drive it, but also how it can potentially drive itself, courtesy of the 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and the forward-facing radar that activate its autopilot system with integrated auto steer function. Autopilot will position the car centrally within its lane, keep to a chosen speed, regulate the distance to the vehicle in front, and even, in its optional enhanced form, perform lane changes automatically. For the latter function, just flick the indicator stalk in the direction you want to go, and once the camera system's given you the all clear, you're automatically steered over into the next lane. All you have to do for autopilot functionality to be operative is to keep your hand on the wheel at all times. If you're using the system, make sure that's all you do. Even fractional unintended steering inputs will disable the system, a setup that can occasionally overreact to cars around you that the cameras have only just detected. Room for improvement then, but then that's just what Tesla has in mind. Take the clever Smart Summon system that's been added into the optional enhanced autopilot pack we just mentioned. When the Model 3 was launched, the Summon functionality was limited to simply being able to stand outside the car and park it into a tight space using the key fob or a smartphone app. In improved Smart Summon form though, this feature now allows the car to remotely drive out from wherever it's parked and find you, manoeuvring around objects and stopping for pedestrians as necessary. For UK use, your Model Y has to be in your line of sight for this to work. But in the right part of the US, you could theoretically stand outside a multi-storey car park and have the car drive out to greet you. Even more than that is in store for those of the Teslarati who rather bravely fined nearly £7,000 to get themselves Tesla's full self-driving capability package in readiness for a future in which they won't mind surrendering full driving duties to their cars. Ultimately, the plan is that all you'll ever have to do is get in and out of whatever Tesla you've bought. It'll even know where you want it to go if you've programmed your movements into your online calendar. So you get the idea here. Other brands are thinking of this kind of technology. Tesla's actually going out and delivering it, or at least where it's allowed to, anyway. The way this Californian company tells it, buying into a Model Y is a starting point for a whole new kind of automotive life. Maybe it is. Maybe you're not quite ready for that. It's coming though, and this car reassures us that there's at least something in that future to look forward to. Well, you know it was a Tesla, wouldn't you? You'll either think it's cool and minimalistic, or rather anodyne and featureless. There'll be no in-betweens. As for this Model Y, well, it's hard to avoid the initial conclusion that it's merely a 5-door version of its Model 3 saloon stablemate. Elon Musk is publicly proud of the fact that the two cars share 75% of the same components, though actually most of these must be to do with the powertrain because the dimensions between the two cars are somewhat different. Predictably, for a car that wants to have something of a crossover vibe, the main difference is height. This Y is a considerable 181mm taller than a 3, and only 27mm of that is from increased ride height, up to 167mm. The two cars are much closer on length, a little surprisingly given that this Model Y needs to be large enough to accommodate a third seating row in some markets. It's 50mm longer than a Model 3, which makes it about the same length as something like a BMW iX3. This Tesla's fish-like silhouette might not be particularly striking, but there's the draw of a standard panoramic roof and, thanks to neat details like the flush door handles, the shape is notably aerodynamic at 0.23 CD. What look like side repeaters behind the front wheel arches are actually cameras for the drive assistance tech, an unfortunate choice of placement because they're right in the path of dirt being thrown up by the wheels, which means that in the winter you often get messages saying the side cameras are blocked. Those wheels, by the way, which sit in black plastic-clad arches, are 19 inches as standard, with these 20 inches optional if you don't mind compromising slightly on range, and 21-inch rims distinguishing the top performance variant. At the front end, differences between this car and its sedan counterpart are very difficult indeed to spot, though actually this Y is 70mm wider. Unlike most rivals, there's no pretense at any sort of front grille. All the cooling air that's needed is inhaled by this broad intake below the number plate, flanked by slim fog lights. Obviously, things are different at the back compared to a Model 3, this being a hatch, like virtually all its mid-sized EV segment rivals. As with the Model S and the Model 3, Tesla's mounted the charging flap neatly in the offside rear light cluster and made the socket inside CCS compatible so that a wider number of public charging stations can be used. Under the skin lies the usual skateboard-style chassis you get in EVs that locates the drivetrain and the batteries as low as possible in the car, enhancing interior space and lowering the centre of gravity. In this case, though, the structure features an awful lot of aluminium, including a big single-piece casting for the rear understructure, which pays off in terms of curb weight. 1,979 kilograms is undeniably portly, but it's a lot lighter than most of this car's competitors. OK, time to take a look inside. Now, a neat touch is that as long as you're logged into the car with Tesla's smartphone app, it'll unlock itself and turn itself on when it detects your phone. Or you can unlock the car more manually by holding this provided RFID smart card up to the B-pillar, though it's a bit fiddly to find the right spot. Either way, the door opens with a press on the larger part of this black release handle. Once inside, you'll find yourself seated in a cabin identical to that of Tesla's Model 3, which means it's more minimalist than a Scandinavian loft. Well, in terms of button clutter, anyway. There's nothing minimalist about this enormous 15-inch central touchscreen, onto which virtually all the comfort, infotainment and driving features you'll need have been located, including those you'd normally find in a conventional instrument cluster, here missing too. Beyond this, operating control provision has been kept to the absolute minimum. Don't bother looking for a gear stick, a starter button, a handbrake switch or physical ventilation controls. Even the vents themselves are pretty hidden. Tesla also thought about getting rid of steering wheel stalks, as it has done on the latest Model S, but they're reluctantly retained here. The left one for indicators and the right for gear selection. Otherwise, you're limited to a couple of unmarked scroll wheels on the steering wheel spokes, and legislation requires the brand to provide a proper hazard warning button, unusually located up near the frameless rear view mirror. Minimality is all well and good, but a potential premium segment European buyer of this car is ideally going to want it to be accompanied by the kind of cabin quality and richness of interior design that the posh German brands, along with Jaguar, Volvo and Lexus, now provide in this segment. Tesla's made great strides forward in this regard in recent years, but we still can't pretend that to be what you get here. To be frank, the stripped-out feel doesn't really help in this regard. Neither does the artificial wood strip that spans the dash flowing into the doors, or the shiny finish of the vegan leather upholstery, which can be impractically bleached white if you pay extra. As for Tesla's curious insistence on displaying the usual driving instruments on the nearer third of the central touchscreen, Well, in our view, that'd be fine if this layout was supplemented by a head-up display. But you can't have that. So you've constantly to be flicking your eyes away from the road and looking at the monitor. Adapting to this isn't difficult, and the way that the driving graphics show surrounding traffic really is very clever. But the whole setup isn't optimum in the way that such a clean sheet design could have been. Still, compensatory technology is absolutely dripping from every menu and pinch and swipe action accessible through this enormously capable central monitor, which, unlike earlier larger Teslas, is landscape rather than portrait orientated. You can have the screen display in either light or dark formats, and as usual with monitors of this sort these days, it splits itself into sections, usually a big car function infographic on the nearer part, with media selections and Google Nav mapping on the further side. The current driver profile, outside temperature, time and driving range, meanwhile, display in tiny digits along the top. Your main access point for selectable features is along the bottom of the screen, with a row of rather small icons for the main things you'll need. The audio volumes on the far left, and along the bottom of the frame there are a couple of temperature icons too, one for either side of the cabin. A click on either connecting you through to a pop-up and very detailed climate menu. These sit either side of a row of 7 little shortcut icons for media, Bluetooth, calendar, consumption, associated functions, the camera view system and your phone settings. Arguably more important than any of this, though, is the functionality that lies behind this car icon on the bottom right of the display, which clicks you through to the main driving menu and settings screen. The top 2 sub-menus in the list are the most important ones, the first being controls and the second pedals and steering. Controls is where you go to activate, amongst other things, the mirrors, the lights and, perhaps most irritatingly, the wipers, though an indicator column stalk press does give you one flick across the screen, should you splash through a puddle. The pedals and steering section, meanwhile, deals with acceleration settings and the car's steering and stopping modes. Lots to adjust to then, and not all of it's great. The voice control isn't as intuitive as the systems you'll find in some rival premium brand models. And you can't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring, which is annoying. You merely sync your handset through Bluetooth. Still, there's also lots here we really like. The clever camera setup, the dashcam able to record up to 10 minutes of footage, the music system designed to function with the Spotify and Tidal online music libraries that can locate any track or artist you care to name, and the way the Wi-Fi package with its easy web access can allow you to easily stream from Netflix, YouTube and streaming sites like Disney+. Once full self-driving is approved by the regulators, Tesla says it'll activate this screen so that both front seat passengers will be able to settle back and view films from these and other sources on the move when the car's autonomous full self-driving capability is selected. Plus, there's still no better navigation system than the one you get in a Tesla, provided there's a decent mobile reception signal anyway. Thanks to a 4G Google Maps connection, it can show you traffic build-up points and Google Earth images. In addition, of course, it's the point from which you'll be planning your journeys, with displays predicting the percentage of battery charge that'll remain at your required destination and the amount you'll be left with upon returning home. There's more, of course. You knew there would be. There's a karaoke section if you want to have a sing-along. Tune-in connects you into global radio stations, and an arcade option allows you to play video games to your heart's content when the car is stationary. Select Toy Box and it all gets a bit sillier, with rival brands merely being able to draw pictures on the screen with your fingertip might be considered enough of a nod to entertainment should you be stuck in a traffic jam. But here there's much more. Depending on your mood, you can direct the screen to show a crackling fireplace, use the Tracks section to record your own music, or play with a colorizer that'll change the paintwork of your Model Y on screen. When parked up, you can select a light show or a boombox to entertain a crowd, and there's even a whoopee cushion emissions screen. Yes, really, with different styles of fart delivery. Any of these you really like can be activated to replace the usual indicator clicks if you want to prank the next person likely to be driving your Model Y. Hours of fun guaranteed. Let's get back to being sensible. The scroll controls on the steering wheel are cleverly dual purpose. 1 minute, for instance, you're using the left one to activate the audio volume. The next, you're using it to adjust door mirror positioning. The driver profile feature we mentioned earlier allows you to save power adjustment settings for the seating and steering wheel, as well as personalising the infotainment and tech features you prefer to use. Talking of seats, the driver's chair includes lumbar adjustment, but some of our testers still felt it managed to be a little short on lower back support. As for the overall driving position, well, you sit a little higher than normal because you're perched on top of a bank of batteries beneath the floor. This isn't quite enough for the car to feel SUV-like, but along with the panoramic windscreen and the low waistline, it certainly helps with all-round visibility, which is welcome since otherwise that might be a fraction problematic thanks to the chunky A-pillars and the slightly restricted over-the-shoulder view you get rearwards. It's also worth mentioning that the rear view mirror is mounted a fraction too low on the windscreen, which can occasionally block your view when turning left. What else? Well, having spent ages stripping buttons out of this cabin, the designers then decided to add a couple back in to rather unnecessarily replace conventional door catches. You might think some of the extra climate options on the pop-up ventilation screen are necessary too, though we rather like them. Keep, dog and camp modes that continue ventilation fan operation after you leave the car down to 20% battery level so as to rid the interior of any lingering odours. We also like the cabin's integrated Sentry mode, which uses the car's camera system to record outside theft threats. When one's detected, it not only activates the alarm, but increases the brightness of the centre screen and plays music on maximum volume while sending a message to you via the Tesla app, after which you can download a video of the incident starting 10 minutes prior to the time the threat was detected. Storage for your odds and ends is obviously aided by the lack of the kind of enormous transmission tunnel that on any ordinary car would stretch between the seats up into the centre console. Teslas use that freed up space to install a deep lidded box with a sliding top. 2 almost invisible USB-C ports reside within. A couple of cup holders, which also should be covered but aren't, sit just behind, and in front of another deep box under the central armrest, which incorporates a 12-volt socket. Tesla's forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment, but this shallow segmented panel under the screen usefully provides space for 2 phone charging mats, and the door bins are big, as is the glove box, which you might spend ages trying to work out how to open. It's an option in the controls screen menu. And finally, here's one of our favourite touches, these lovely 2-piece magnetic strips that fit over the sun visor mirrors, the vanity light activating as you pull away the bottom part. Right, time to take a look in the back. Now, a relatively long wheelbase by class standards should help here, as should the fact that the Model Y is longer than quite a few of its more obvious rivals in this segment. An Audi Q4 e-tron, for instance, is 163mm shorter. Get inside, and the first thing you might notice here is the completely flat floor. The usual transmission tunnel's not needed, of course, because there's no mechanical transmission. Even better, there's much more room than is usually provided for a centre-seated passenger to slide their shoes forward beneath this jutting console with its twin vents. True, you'll rarely need this central pew to be occupied, but the space provided for it adds to the airy feel already created by the rear quarter lights and primarily by this huge, standard panoramic glass roof. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with a sliding blind for the times when you want the interior to feel a little cosier. For the two outer passengers, things are a little more comfortable than they would be in the brand's alternative Model 3 saloon, because the bench is mounted slightly higher, so your knees don't end up being quite so much arched towards your chin. Even so, a couple of 6-footers should still find that headroom is ample. You're well provided for back here too, with big door bins, narrow seat back pockets, overhead reading lights and pop-out coat hooks. The door cards with their Alcantara-style trimming add a quality touch, but we'd like to have seen the option of the kind of 3-zone climate system that competitors offer to give rear seat folk their own climate controls. There are rear seat heaters back here, but annoyingly, back seat passengers have to ask front folk to operate them because this can only be done through the main screen. Finally, let's take a look at the boot, on the way to which we'll mention that the optional third seating row you can have on this car in the US isn't yet being offered here. And as you can probably tell from a glance at the rear hindquarters of this car, the space this feature provides is somewhat cramped. Anyway, on to luggage space. Well, the first luggage space anyway, because there's no need for an engine up front, a frunk compartment sits in the nose. And we'll get to that once we've raised the standard powered tailgate and seen what's on offer back here. There's 854 litres of capacity on offer here, which only sounds like a lot because Tesla measures up to roof height rather than up to window level like everyone else. Unfortunately, no parcel shelf is provided, so everything's in plain sight. Anyway, it's a good, square, usable space which is usefully improved by this versatile floor with its twin luggage boards. The near section's deep, the further one shallow, with access in both cases aided by the way that the lids can stand vertically on their own. What else? Well, thanks to these deep recesses either side of the main cargo area, you won't struggle to get wide items like golf club bags in width-wise. Tie-down points have been completely forgotten. A flexible 40-20-40 split is provided for the rear seat back, so longer items like skis can be slid in without disturbing a couple of rear-seated occupants. Should you need more room, flattening the bench backrest is aided by little power buttons on the left for seat retraction. You don't get a completely flat load area as a result, but the 2,100 litre capacity freed up as a result should be ample for most owners. We'll finish with a look at the frunk, or the fruit, or whatever you want to call it, up front in the nose. It can't quite swallow suitcases like the one in the Model S, but its 117 litre capacity is probably good for a couple of small, squashy bags. Pricing is a moving goalpost these days, even more so when it comes to Teslas. The Model 3 saloon we tested only 2.5 years ago had risen in price by nearly 25% by the time of this test, and you can expect this Model Y to become dearer than the figures we're about to quote when the Berlin-made version with its more frugal 4680 series battery comes on stream in late 2022. Here and now, at the time of making this film in early summer 2022, with this original Chinese-made 2170 series battery version, Tesla was asking around £58,000 for the Model Y long-range, dual-motor, all-wheel drive variant we have here, the version that the vast majority of customers will choose. You'll need £68,000 for the more powerful performance flagship derivative that sits at the top of the lineup. If all-wheel drive and long-range aren't particularly significant factors for you, then you'll also want to consider the entry-level rear-wheel drive Model Y, which cost around £52,000 at the time of this test and can go up to 283 miles between charges. If the sales figures for the Model 3 are any guide, it's an all-wheel drive Model Y that most customers will want anyway. Compared to its identically engineered showroom stablemate, it's £1,000 more in this long-range form, but for some reason, a Model Y performance is £5,000 more than the equivalent Model 3 version. We should acknowledge at this juncture that relatively few Tesla drivers ever buy their cars outright. So let's also give you an idea of what you'd be looking at in terms of the cost of perhaps a more tax-efficient means of acquisition. All figures current at the time of this test in summer 2022. So let's look at a Tesla PCP finance deal over 4 years at 10,000 miles a year with a down payment of £6,000. On that basis, this long-range variant could be yours for £786 a month. With the performance version, that figure would rise to £897 a month. Right, time to help you peruse the market and look at how this Tesla's value proposition compares with direct mid-sized crossover EVs from other brands. Now, at first glance, there seem to be a huge number of alternative, cheaper options, but most of them, even in the most potent all-wheel drive forms, offer much less power than a dual-motor Model Y, even if your comparison point is with this standard long-range variant. You might, of course, quite understandably conclude that you don't really need well over 400 brake horsepower from your mid-sized EV. And if that's the case, there are lots of cheaper segment alternatives in the £40,000 to £50,000 bracket. If we're going to compare apples with apples, though, the alternative options in the class narrow considerably. Two Chinese Geely-owned brand models probably offer the closest match, both using the same 402 brake horsepower twin-motor powertrain. The Polestar 2 long-range dual motor costs around £48,000, while the Volvo C40 Recharge Twin requires around £58,000. You might also consider the Nissan Ariya's e-Force Performance, also at around £58,000, or the Kia EV6 GT around £60,000. If you've more to spend, BMW's i4 M50 costs around £64,000, though that's a saloon, while the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT costs around £68,000. About the same kind of spend required to get slightly larger SUVs in this class, like the Jaguar I-Pace, the Mercedes EQC and the Audi e-tron Sportback. Though with those latter three EVs, you're getting considerably less power. As you can see from all these comparisons, when you think about what you're getting here, a family hatch with a minimum of 434 brake horsepower and one that in performance form can keep up with a Ferrari Portofino, then the value proposition stacks up pretty well. OK, so that's briefed you on the market. If, having considered that, you conclude, understandably, that there's nothing quite like a Model Y and want to consider actually buying or leasing one, then you're going to need to know just how generous Tesla's been with standard specs. So let's take a look at that now. Starting with what's included on this standard long-range variant. So, tick off big 19-inch Gemini alloy wheels, power folding mirrors and a vast tinted panoramic two-part glass roof with ultraviolet and infrared protection. Tesla also includes its autopilot system on this car, which is a lot more than merely an advanced cruise control. It enables your Model Y to steer, accelerate and brake automatically around other vehicles and pedestrians in its lane. You'll want to consider enhancing the autopilot setup, options for which we'll brief you on in a moment. Inside, the key feature is the enormous 15-inch centre touchscreen that seamlessly integrates media, navigation, communications, cabin control and vehicle data into one intuitive interface. Throughout your ownership period, over-the-air updates into it will add functionality, enhance performance and improve the driving experience of your car. Scroll down the centre screen menu options and you also find a host of little touches like the arcade and toy box games that'll entertain you if you're stuck in a traffic jam or waiting for a pickup. There's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto option here, but Tesla has its own smartphone mirroring system that works almost as well. You also get a year's use of what Tesla calls a premium connectivity pack. This gives you satellite maps with live traffic visualization, in-car internet streaming music and media, more frequent over-the-air updates and an internet browser. What else? Well, the cabin also features black premium vegan leather upholstery, 12-way power adjustable heated front seats, heated rear seats, an auto-dimming rear view mirror, 4 USB ports, and a 14-speaker premium audio system. There's also a clever Sentry mode that you can activate via the centre screen as a guard to record any damage to your car, say when you've left it parked. Should that happen, the Model Y's camera system will record the incident, so you've evidence to help apprehend the perpetrator. Other cameras can be used to record dash cam footage for the same kind of purpose, and you can also view this on your phone. Talking of which, we should mention that for all owners, there's the usual downloadable application, the Tesla app, allowing you to access vehicle and climate controls, set charging times, schedule services and manage payments. We'll finish our perusal of standard kit with a look at what's included on the top performance variant, which of course has all the long-range derivative features plus a package of others. A performance spec Model Y like this is recognisable by its larger 21-inch Uber turbine wheels, through the spokes of which you glimpse the red calipers of the uprated performance braking system, and which also features lowered suspension and aluminium alloy pedals. On to options. Now, there aren't many. What you can't have, at the time of this test anyway, is the third row seating option that Model Y customers are offered in the US. You can pay £1,100 extra to specify a black and white coloured interior with white upholstery, and you can add this test car's larger 20-inch induction wheels for a further £2,100. Unusually for an EV, you can also pay more for a tow hitch, this one costing just over £1,000 and able to tug up to 1,600 kilos. Bear in mind, before ticking any of these boxes, that you'll almost certainly be paying Tesla extra for your choice of paint colour. This car's pearl white multi-coat finish is the only one you get as standard. The others, at £1,100 extra, are solid black, midnight silver metallic, deep blue metallic, or, if you're prepared to pay £2,100 more, a rather lovely red multi-coat finish. Otherwise, the only options relate to camera features. Many will want the enhanced autopilot pack we've been trying on this test car, which costs £3,400 more and has 5 key elements. First, your Model Y will navigate using the autopilot system, which will give you automatic driving from motorway on-ramp to off-ramp, including interchanges and overtaking slower cars. Second, there's an auto lane change feature that gives you automatic motorway lane changes. Just flick the indicator stalk in the direction you want to go, and once the camera system's given you the all clear, you're automatically steered over into the next lane. Thirdly, there's an auto park system that'll help you identify a parallel or perpendicular space, then steer your Tesla into it. And fourthly, there's a summon feature that'll allow you to park your car using your smartphone while standing outside it, as you might want to do if, say, you're trying to get into a very narrow space. This is further embellished by a smart summon feature, which, as long as the car is in your line of sight, will enable it to drive itself out of its space, come and find you. Brilliant. If you want to go further, Tesla's offering the chance to purchase what it calls a full self-driving capability pack, costing a cool £6,800. This gives you all the capabilities of the enhanced autopilot pack, plus traffic light and stop sign control, and for the future, Tesla's auto steer on city streets feature. Traffic light and stop sign control uses the vehicle's forward-facing cameras in addition to GPS data and slows the car for all detected traffic lights, including green, blinking yellow and off lights, in addition to stop signs and some road markings. As the Model Y approaches an intersection, the touchscreen displays a notification indicating the intention to slow down, and unless you indicate that you want to continue, the car will stop at the light, coming to a halt at the red line displayed on the touchscreen's driving visualization. The auto steer on city streets feature goes a lot further than that. It's basically full self-drive, allowing the car to navigate around complex urban environments automatically. We should tell you that independent tests have so far suggested that this latter piece of tech is way off being production ready. And even when it is, there's no guarantee that government legislation will allow it to be operational here for some time yet. In short, we'd suggest that you'd have to be a very brave buyer indeed to tick the full self-driving capability pack box. We normally finish this section of these reviews by talking about safety. In this case, we've already touched on that when briefing you on all the high-tech features of the autopilot system, which uses 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors and a forward-facing radar. These all combine to deliver an impressive roster of features. We'll brief you on those not yet mentioned. There's autonomous braking, of course, courtesy of what Tesla calls its forward collision warning and automatic emergency brake systems. And as you'd expect on a car of this price, there's a blind spot collision feature to stop you from pulling out when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. But Tesla's gone further than that. The thing we all love about electric cars is the instant acceleration they give, but that can get you into a lot of trouble if you hit the accelerator too hard when, say, you're in a traffic jam or when parking. An obstacle-aware acceleration feature aims to take care of that for you. If your Tesla senses that there's something like a car or a building in front of you, it will limit your acceleration if you accidentally tap on the accelerator too hard or confuse the brake pedal with the accelerator, so enabling you to avoid an expensive collision. And there's more. Emergency lane departure avoidance will automatically steer your car back into its lane if the software thinks you're going to crash or veer off the road. Then there's lane departure avoidance, a system first introduced in the US to combat situations where Tesla drivers were engaging the car's traffic-aware cruise control, then moving lanes on the highway without turn signals and without hands on the steering wheel. Lane departure avoidance will admonish you for this, and if you keep on doing it, then the system will eventually turn on your hazard lights and automatically slow down the car to 15 miles below either the speed limit or your current set speed. This feature can be turned on or off at will and works between speeds of 25 and 90 miles an hour. Beyond all this camera stuff, it's worth pointing out that the Model Y is also an intrinsically safe car, with all the same design engineering lavished upon its close cousin, the Model 3, a car that gained a top 5-star rating from Euro NCAP. To get that, of course, it had to have all the usual passive safety features, pedestrian-friendly panel work, plus the usual stability and autonomous braking features, and, of course, a full complement of airbags. On a dual-motor model like this one, the second motor sits within the subframe. Attached via 2 mounts, it's designed to pivot backwards into a vacant space during a collision, better protecting the passenger compartment. Clever. So much about this car is. Tesla no longer enjoys the advantage it used to have over its rivals in terms of operating range, but that advantage still exists even with the earlier 2170 series battery Model Y we were given to test here at the time of making this film in early summer 2022. With that earlier version of this car, the driving range figure Tesla was quoting for this volume Model Y long-range variant at the time of making this review was 331 miles. It was 319 miles for the top Model Y performance derivative. For the entry-level rear-wheel drive version, it's 283 miles. It's quite likely, though, that you'll be watching this film at a time when Model Ys for our market hail not from the Chinese Shanghai gigafactory that fabricated this one, but from the brand's newer gigafactory near Berlin, which began producing this car at the same time it was updated with the company's much improved 4680 cylindrical battery pack. With that, the battery cells are bigger, 46mm in diameter and 80mm long, hence the name, and have more densely packed internals, which means the electrons haven't got as far to travel to generate current. And, unlike the previous power pack, the 4680 battery is incorporated as a part of the car's structure, eliminating extraneous metal and reducing body weight by 1/10. All of this, we understand, will improve driving range by around 16%, which we find very impressive because even in this 2170 series form, this Model Y was already out in front in its segment in terms of driving range. Yes, you'll find competitors which seem to get close to this Model Y long-range variant's 331-mile figure, but look at the detail and you'll find that the cars in question have nothing like the 434 bhp power output you get here. There aren't many EV rivals able to match this sort of output, but for a comparison perspective, we'll look at the driving range figures of the few that can, that are sized similarly to this car and put out over 400 brake horsepower. Volvo's C40 recharged twin with 402 bhp manages 274 miles. The Polestar 2 long-range dual motor with 402 bhp manages up to 299. And a Ford Mustang Mach-E GT with 480 bhp manages 310 miles. Kia's EV6 GT puts out 577 bhp, but that only goes 252 miles between charges. If you want to better a Model Y on driving range, basically you'll need another Tesla. Interestingly, the Model 3 Saloon, with exactly the same drivetrains, manages 374 miles between charges in long-range form, 43 miles better than a Y, and 340 miles in performance form, 21 miles better than a Model Y performance. Those aren't real-world figures, of course. Manufacturer WLTP-rated official figures never are. On this test, driving normally, we've been regularly getting 280 to 290 miles of range from each charge. And Tesla's estimated energy consumption figure for this car, 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour, has in reality been more like 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. But the standard heat pump will help preserve that capability in cold weather. And, as a bottom line, it's probably true to tell you that at the wheel of a Model Y, you'd probably get 15 to 20 miles more driving range than most much lower powered segment competitors. A figure you could comfortably double if your comparison point was with the more directly equivalent high-performance segment rivals we just mentioned. And that's before that 4680 battery series update we just mentioned, which we'd recommend you wait for or ask your dealer about. As we said, it's all very impressive. Beyond the simple matter of driving range, there's another compelling reason to choose a Model Y over an EV from another brand, and it'll be obvious when the time comes to power back this neatly disguised panel around the offside rear light cluster and replenish your battery power. Tesla is the only manufacturer that's had the guts to put itself on the line by going out and creating its own exclusive high-power charging network. There were, at the time of this test, around 624 Tesla supercharger locations in the UK, positioned along major routes, the most southerly one being at Lifton in Devon, and the more northerly one being at Aviemore in Scotland. There are now well over 30,000 supercharger locations worldwide. Each of these works at 250 kilowatts, just shy of the 270 kilowatt figure rival Hyundai and Kia branded EVs can achieve. The Tesla charge speed allowing you to replenish the battery up to 80% capacity in as little as 36 minutes. Most of the brand's supercharger stations are only accessible to Tesla drivers, as obviously are the additional superchargers fitted in the brand's dealer network. And the company's installed a further 550 less powerful but still very useful so-called destination chargers in clubs, hotels and other public locations around the country, also exclusive to Tesla drivers and there to charge your car over a few hours. In other words, if you drive a Model Y or any other Tesla, you're far more likely to be able to undertake a longer trip with mid-journey charging at a convenient point than you would be if you bought a different EV from another mainstream or premium brand. That's a crucial advantage, particularly with the current patchy state of the European public EV charging infrastructure. especially as this Tesla can also be recharged at nearly all the other places other makers' electric vehicles can plug in, or absolutely all of them if you purchase the optional CHAdeMO adapter your Tesla Centre will sell you. Earlier Tesla models which lacked the necessary CCS adapter couldn't do this. In terms of other charging stations, your best bet is to find one of the 150 kilowatt Ionity charging points. But there aren't that many of those. The last figure we had on that was 80 sites up and running in the UK. A lesser 120 kilowatt fast charger will charge up to 80% in around 30 to 40 minutes. You're much more likely, though, to come across one of the longer existing 50 kilowatt public charging points, which will charge up to 80% in around 75 minutes, though even these can be difficult to find depending on where in the country you happen to live. At the time of this test in summer 2022, there were more than 42,000 public charging locations in the UK, more public places to charge than petrol stations. But bear in mind that most of these still won't be of the faster 50 kilowatt kind, but lower powered outlets. So it's best to consult websites like ZapMap, not only to find your nearest public charger, but to check on the speed it will replenish your battery. You can use your Model Y's infotainment screen to organise your journey between charge stations. And a clever touch is the car's inbuilt en route battery warm-up system, which senses when you've put in a navigational route to a supercharger station and gets the battery cells at the ideal temperature for charging as you drive. Which means that when your car finally gets connected to the supercharger, power transfer is as efficient as it can be, which translates into quicker charging times. It's also worth knowing that Tesla's just started opening new V3 supercharging sites, the same as an ordinary supercharging site, but with a 1 megawatt power cabinet added into the equation. That means 250 kilowatt peak charging rates for each car, which would allow this long-range Model Y to top up 75 miles of range in just 5 minutes. Of course, as with any EV, most of your charging with this car will be done at home once you've had fitted the garage wall box that you couldn't really own this car without. Tesla will sell you its own wall box, which at the time of this costs £460 plus installation charges, and looks very slick, but unfortunately doesn't qualify for the usual government grant towards purchase. Stick to a more common wall box from suppliers like ChargeMaster, Podpoint, ABL or Rolec, and you'll probably be paying significantly less because all these companies sell charge points that do qualify for the government grant. Obviously though, installation costs will rise if significant electrification work is needed to get an appropriate power supply out to your garage. Once installed, charge times depend on wall box spec. Tesla reckons that from empty to full, an 11 kilowatt wall box would replenish a Model Y 75 kilowatt hour battery in about 7.5 hours. But the 7.4 kilowatt wall box more owners are likely to have needs 11 hours and 45 minutes. Which means that the usual EV manufacturer claim of full overnight charging is here only just about justified and won't add up at all if you happen to have a late night and an early start. For reference, if you connected this Model Y up to an ordinary household 3-pin plug, it would take the best part of 2 days to charge itself from empty. As usual with electric cars, there's an app to allow you to set charging times using your smartphone. And the same app can also allow you to preset the climate in your car before you reach it, so you don't have to strain the battery with a big initial need for cabin heating or cooling when you get in. And the app can quickly tell you where to find nearby Tesla supercharging and destination charging locations. As for charging costs, well, at the time of this test, Tesla was suggesting a guide price of 28 pence per kilowatt hour, around twice what you'd pay to plug in at home. That's still considerably cheaper than pump fuel though. On its website, Tesla airily estimates that you'd save £7,000 over fuel costs if you were to run this car over 5 years, though gives no information as to what mileage, electricity tariff or fuel cost that savings figure is based upon, probably because it's so complicated to calculate. Whatever formula you use though, there's certainly no doubt that the savings in switching to EV motoring are substantial. The cost of less powerful non-Tesla public chargers varies a bit. Some are completely free, and a growing number of larger businesses offer workplace charging points with free access throughout the day. Obviously, the cost of charging at home will vary with the tariff you're on, but as a guide, it'd be typical for a full at-home charge of a Model Y to cost around £10 at typical electricity rates. Compare that to the 70 or 80 quid you'd spend to fill the tank of a comparable petrol or diesel executive model. Yes, even a plug-in hybrid one. It's generally estimated that the cost of running an electric car is around 3 pence per mile, compared to 12 to 14 pence per mile for an equivalent petrol or diesel vehicle. The difference over combustion engine costs would widen further if you were able to plug your car in at lower off-peak electricity rates. There's a scheduled charging part of the centre screen's charging section to help you do that. It'd be even better, of course, if you were able to charge up using solar energy generated from panels on the roof of your house. If your home has the solar charging panels that work with a photovoltaic system, the car can be set to charge preferentially using sunlight-sourced electricity, and can even be set to charge in line with forecast phases of sunshine. Tesla makes solar panels, by the way, and can also provide a Powerwall home battery for well over £6,000 to conveniently store all the energy that any brand of solar panelling will produce. With all we've said about potential charging issues, it's possible that we're painting an unnecessarily bleak picture here. Obviously, it's quite unlikely that a typical Model Y owner will be running this model as an only car. And we're perfectly aware that the average person's daily round-trip commute is about a tenth of the operating range of this Tesla. Ah yes, range, we're back to that. Other EVs provide almost endless driver tools for maximising this, things like efficiency modes, eco settings, and primarily a proliferation of brake regeneration options aimed at allowing you to either reduce or increase the amount of energy harvested as you slow the car. On a Model Y, there's very little of that. No steering wheel brake regen paddles, no one-pedal drive button, just a hold stopping mode setting that extends regenerative braking to lower speeds, and softer acceleration setting badged chill that gives you more laid-back throttle mapping. In one way, this more prescriptive approach is quite refreshing. In another, it's surprising that Tesla doesn't feel the need to involve the driver more in the energy harvesting process. As you'd expect, the car's central screen offers lots of data to help plan your electric driving life. We've already mentioned how both this monitor and the associated app can brief you on your plug-in program and on charging locations. And of course, there are the usual real-time battery status readouts, but your Model Y can certainly be a lot more proactive than that. Put a destination into the navigation system and it will helpfully tell you the proportion of battery charge you'll still have when you reach where you're going, and the proportion you'll have when you arrive back home. If the destination you've chosen can't be reached with the driving range you have available, then charging points along the route will be selected for you. Once you set off, the calculations continue based on your driving style, so you'll be advised if, for example, you're cruising at too fast a speed to reach your destination on the charge available. And a detailed graphical readout in the screen's consumption screen section can show your success, or otherwise, in driving frugality over the last 5, 15 or 30 miles, along with both instant and average energy consumption figures. What else might you need to know? Maybe you'll be interested in the fact that as an EV vehicle owner, you'll be exempt from the London congestion charge, well, until 2025 anyway. At current rates, that would save a London commuter £15 a day. Of more importance will be the news that EVs are exempt from car tax. For company car users, electric vehicles offer potentially huge tax savings as they incur benefit-in-kind taxation rated at just 2%. As for ownership peace of mind, well, the Tesla warranty, 4 years and 50,000 miles, has pluses and minuses compared to the usual 3-year or 60,000 mile packages offered by obvious rivals. The battery and drive unit are covered by their own 8-year, 120,000 mile warranty. Not only does this cover you against faults, but it also guarantees a minimum 70% retention of battery capacity throughout the planned duration. Maintenance is obviously more straightforward than it would be for a combustion engine model. An electric vehicle does, after all, have 20% fewer moving parts. There's no fuel tank, no exhaust system, and obviously no internal combustion engine. You wouldn't think that, though, to look at the service intervals needed by some of this car's direct rivals. A Jaguar I-Pace, for instance, needs a garage visit every 21,000 miles. With the Model Y, no annual service is required. Owners only need to bring their cars in to check certain components at specific intervals. Over-the-air updates and remote diagnostics will help make some smaller maintenance jobs easier to carry out, and Tesla's mobile service technicians are also there to make your ownership life more convenient. Less good news is found in across-the-board insurance ratings for both versions of this Model Y that's a top-of-the-shop Group 50U, which really is ludicrous. Brokers, it seems, don't like electric cars, fearing substantial costs to repair the EV powertrain after a major collision. It's worth shopping around, though. A number of brokers, LV for instance, offer specific packages for EV drivers, and Tesla has negotiated a special deal with Direct Line that a lot of its owners use. Ultimately, though, you'll probably pay more to insure a Model Y than would be the case with a direct combustion engined rival. If you let Tesla guide you, you'll find that it won't be that much more. You might also expect gloomy news when it comes to the issue of residual values. EVs did, after all, used to drop faster than an anvil off a cliff in terms of depreciation. As the market's matured, though, things have improved. At the time of this test, independent experts were saying that a long-range Model Y variant like this one will retain around 54% of its value over 3 years and 36,000 miles, so it'll probably be worth around £30,000 should you decide to sell it on after that 3-year period. And what about the green issues? Well, some in the green lobby get very angry about the whole pure electric car zero emissions ethos, reckoning that this ignores the well-to-wheel demands of supplying the electricity that powers cars of this kind. We'd respond by pointing out that these people usually completely overlook the fact that CO2 figures for conventional cars fail to take into account the logistical cost of getting fuel to the pump. Still, if you're one of those enviro-conscious folk, we'll tell you that using a well-to-wheels calculation based on typical use of the UK's energy grid, taking an average UK grid CO2 contribution of 367 grams per kilowatt, the burden of filling your batteries in this car would result in a theoretical 34.5 grams per kilometre of CO2 being released into the atmosphere. That's certainly good, but some way from being completely green. Which is also a comment you could apply to electric vehicle engineering as a whole. Tesla doesn't seem to be putting the same amount of effort into battery recycling technology that we're seeing from segment rivals, which is a worry ecologically if no proper recycling plans in place by the time this car comes to the end of its life. The batteries in its drivetrain can't simply be scrapped because lithium ion has explosive elements, so if there's no alternative, they would have to end up in landfill, which is hardly sustainable in the long term for humankind. But then nor is the pollution caused by combustion power. If you see the EV solution as the lesser of the two evils, and your choice of a mid-sized battery-powered model prioritises range and charging convenience, we think you'll find plenty to interest you here. Unlike Tesla, we don't think that fully electrified technology is the only answer to the future of individual transportation. But it's the best answer we have right now, and at present Tesla is still delivering it in a way that makes the SUV-based EV efforts of some other manufacturers look dull and derivative. Of course, this Model Y, the most important Tesla yet, has a much tougher job on its hands than the Mark's earlier models had, especially now that well-funded Far East makers are becoming well-established in the EV market. But the American brand has the advantage of a head start and a pioneering mindset, both of which it will need in the years ahead. There's still plenty for the company to work on, though. European rivals are catching this American brand quickly in terms of electrified powertrain technology, and they often shade Tesla in terms of cabin quality. But they still can't beat this brand's battery range, nor can they yet match Tesla's public charging infrastructure. There's nothing from any other maker like Tesla's network of supercharging stations. Those attributes will understandably sway many customers towards this car. These people will need to be forgiving in terms of ride and refinement standards that are some way behind the class best. But they'll enjoy what we think are really credible standards of handling for an EV this heavy. It's a car that, in the right circumstances, you could really enjoy driving, which is a touch ironic given the amount of effort the brand is putting into fully autonomous tech. Potential customers will also like the fact that the Model Y is arguably the most avant-garde medium-sized crossover in its segment, and potentially, in top performance form, the very fastest too. If these sound like winning attributes in a car of this kind, you'll know where to start your search.